All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Dawn, and I am a grief recovery coach, and Lois Hall has agreed to talk with me. And I'm gonna be honest, I have lost your bio, so if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
I will be glad to. And actually, we're grief recovery methods specialists. We don't say we're counselors or coaches because we're not. We're grief recovery methods specialists. Some states actually have licensing requirements for counselors, for always for counselors, and some for coaches. So I am a grief recovery method specialist. I live in the Columbus, Ohio area. I grew up on a farm. I always wanted to be a doctor. Didn't get to go to medical school, and so I got a job with the Ohio Department of Health. My career was in public health, and many wonderful things happened there. But I was the first epidemiologist to work in when AIDS first started, to do AIDS surveillance. And that was really where my interest in grief was piqued, because the grief of the families when their sons back in the early days would come home and say, "Mom, Dad, I'm gay and I've got AIDS," and those parents didn't know what to do. It was just a devastating thing for them. And so I found out about John James, who wrote the book, The Grief Recovery Handbook, which is the program that both Dawn and I use when we teach these classes. And John came to Columbus several times and did talks for nurses and doctors and chaplains and pastors and social workers. And finally, he said, I'm not going to come do another talk for you till you get trained. So it was 1998, and I took my grief recovery method training with John. And I've been leading this program then in my community ever since. So 25 plus years, I've been a grief recovery method specialist. I retired from the Ohio Department of Health. I had another public health job for about 8 years. They asked me to be a trainer for them in 2001. And so I've also been a national trainer for the Grief Recovery Institute. And then in 2016, I retired a second time because they asked me if I would come on board and work for them full time. So I'm retired, but I do work full time for the Grief Recovery Institute. We have over 6,000 specialists in the United States and Canada, and we also have specialists literally all around the world, on every continent, I think, except Antarctica. And so that's a little bit about who I am. I love the grief recovery method. For me, it is a public health issue. Grief is a public health issue, and maybe some of the questions Dawn asks will take us down that path. But I love this work, and on my grief recovery method page, I start out by saying I believe all of us could have a healthier, happier, more hope-filled life. And that's it, isn't it? That's the goal. Isn't that what we all want? And so while we're all grievers, every one of us has experienced loss or multiple losses. Don't we just want to get our life back? We want to get our joy back. So healthy, happy, hope-filled. And to me, that's the possibility that the grief recovery method brings to those who go through the program. So that's a little bit about me and who I am and how I got here and why I stay.
Well, that's good. How many classes do you do one-on-one or do you do groups?
I do both. I actually prefer groups. The Grief Recovery Method, there is a book. It's called The Grief Recovery Handbook by John W. James and Russell Friedman. And you can do it as an 8-week group, either in person or online, or you can do it as a 7-session one-on-one, in person or online. And the reason it's 7 sessions if it's one-on-one versus 8 if it's a group is because if it's a one-on-one and somebody misses a session, we just reschedule. If it's a group and somebody misses, we got a little bit of wiggle room there for catching them up. So it's the same program. It's just 1 session shorter if it's one-on-one. So I do both groups and one-on-ones. All of our specialists are certified to do both. And I actually myself prefer the groups because I think people learn from each other. They hold each other up. They build community. A lot of times grievers can feel pretty isolated and lonely. And so being in a group with other people who are also going through the grieving experience, I think is often very helpful for them. Some of our specialists, and I don't know, Dawn, if you are or not, I should have looked that up. Some of our specialists have
Not
also
yet.
a second
I
level
eventually
training.
want to, but I have not been able to
Yeah.
take the class yet.
Yeah, so there's a second level training, which then would allow people to work online. It's just a little bit different when you're online. If we're in person and somebody has an emotional response, I can go to them. I can sit with them. I can talk with them a little more. If we're online, right now, even the people who are online with us, they don't have their cameras on. So we would always ask them to have their cameras on if they're in the class, but it's a little more difficult to see their body language and their emotions. So the online work is a little different, but also very successful. So I have done all of those. I've done groups, I've done one-on-ones, in person, online. There's a second program that we also offer called Helping Children with Loss. And it's not for children, it's for adults, parents, teachers, coaches, counselors, youth pastors, children's services, foster care, juvenile justice, anybody who loves, cares for, or works with kids. It's to help those adults learn how to help the children in their care manage better, deal with, work through the change and loss and grief that they experience. That's a 4-session program, and I've also done that program both in person and online. We have a third program that's specific to pet loss. I have not done that program, although I have people who have come to my grief recovery method program who worked on the death of pets. So a lot of opportunities. Grief is bigger and broader and deeper, I think, than a lot of people think. Most people think it's just about death. It's about a lot of things. Grief is about a lot of things.
Well, that was going to be my next question. What all? I know death is number one a lot, especially with
Yeah.
hospice.
Yeah, exactly. So divorce is another very common one. When somebody gets a divorce, we talk about the end of hopes and dreams and expectations. When you walked down that aisle or you stood before that justice of the peace or however it was you got married, your hopes and dreams and expectations were that you were going to live forever with this person and life was going to be happy and cheery and wonderful and until death do us part. But sometimes those relationships don't work out that way, and so getting a divorce can be a major loss for people. Losing a job, moving, especially for children, moving can be a terrific loss for children. And often too, they don't feel like they've had a choice. Mom and dad just say, hey, we're moving. It's going to be a bigger house, a better house, a nicer neighborhood. You'll make new friends. We'll come back and see your old friends. And to that child, they feel like they're just being drug away from everything that's familiar for them. So moving is another one. Health, illnesses, getting a serious diagnosis is a grieving situation. And sometimes even good things can be grieving situations. Retirement, for example, when you retire, isn't it great? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? What are you going to be? Are you going to travel? Well, sometimes in retirement, well, I miss the people I used to work with. Or who am I now that I've retired, right? Even our loss of identity, loss of that routine, um, having a
Adult
baby,
children. Adult
huh?
children. Adult children.
Having adult children. I told my husband just last night at the dinner table, I miss my sons. I miss my kids. My third child lives here in the local area. Thank goodness we get to see them once in a while. But my two older kids, they live in different cities. I don't see them nearly often enough. I miss them. That's a loss too. I love them. We're in good condition with each other. We're not estranged. They just have busy lives, right? And I don't get to see them as much as I want or talk with them. Having a baby is a great thing. Oh, isn't she cute? Isn't she sweet? Isn't she precious? But what do you lose when you have a baby? First thing I think of is sleep. I like to sleep. And when you have a baby, you lose sleep. And privacy. When will you be able to go to the bathroom by yourself without having somebody put their little hand under the bathroom door? Um, Graduation is another happy thing. Where are you going to go? What are you going to be? Did you get into the college? What are you, right? Think about it from the perspective, first of all, like Dawn said, adult children, that mom and dad empty nesting, that's a real grieving situation when those kids move out. But it's also a loss for the kids. Everything they've known and grown up with that's been routine and familiar for the last 17, 18 years of their life is different, right? They may leave home, whether it's for a job or the military or college. Who's going to cook their favorite meals if mom's not there all the time? How are they going to make money? Where are they going to see their friends? Will their friends, will it ever be the same? So even good things can bring about grieving feelings. In the grief recovery method, we talk about the definition of grief is the natural and normal response to change or loss of any kind. Change or loss of any kind. I don't know where those who are listening are from, but think about all the change and loss that people have experienced in the southeastern part of our country. North Carolina, Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, back-to-back hurricanes, floods, right? The droughts, the heat waves, the fires, all those things that happen with the climate cause us to have losses too. COVID brought other losses, things like loss of jobs, loss of community, not being able to get out and socialize, loss of routines, not being able to go to church or go shopping or go to a restaurant or a concert or a football game. So all kinds of things produce these changes and changes in routines, loss of normal and natural patterns of behavior. And for us, that's the depth and breadth and width of grief. It's all of those things. We just don't usually think of it that way. So.
And you were talking about kids. I feel like they get left out a lot when it comes to grieving.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's why I'm really happy that we have the When Children Grieve program, helping children with loss. It's based on the book When Children Grieve, also by John James and Russell Friedman. Kids do. In fact, I tell people when we're born, that's when our grieving starts, because they bring us out of that warm, cushy, soft space we were in, and the lights are bright and the temperature's cold, and they smack our butt and we cry. Nothing will ever be the same as it was before, right? And then they tell us when we get to be about 2 years old or so, nobody goes to preschool wearing a diaper. Nobody goes to kindergarten sucking on their binky, right? Binkies, blankies, and bottles, I call it. That's kind of the next loss is, and we dismiss it and we demean it. To them, those binkies, blankies, and bottles, those are their comfort sources. And we're telling them they can't have that anymore. I have a grief recovery method colleague who particularly works with young children, and she says even dropping your toddler off at preschool on that first day, right? We've all had the stranger danger talk, stranger danger, don't go with a stranger, stranger danger, stranger danger. But then we drop them off at preschool with all of these strangers, and they start to cry. And what do we say? Come on, don't cry. Be a big person, be strong. Come on, you can do it. Don't cry. What a conflicting message for those children, right? What a conflicting message. How scary is that for those little children? And we talked about moving and how kids don't think they have any choice or voice in that. It just happens to them. Even things like starting school, right? Not being able to be at home with mom anymore. Or changing from elementary to middle school can be a scary event. Maybe if mom and dad get a divorce or one of the parents is incarcerated or is deployed. There's so many things that happen in our kids' lives. And many times they don't have a voice. And in fact, maybe you've said this, I hope I didn't, but maybe you were told this as a child, sit down and shut up. Children are to be seen and not heard. And so exactly, so children feel unheard, like they're invisible. They have no choices. and that's the way they grow up. And they become adults like us who sometimes then also feel still like we don't have any choices, right? When a change happens in our lives. And so, yeah, I have a huge place in my heart for children. First of all, when they're real little, they don't have the language. They don't have the words and the language to talk about how they feel. And then when they start to have language, they don't have the ability to put it together in sentences or to be articulate about how they feel. And then when they finally are at the age and stage where they do have the words and they can be articulate, that's where they're told to sit down and shut up. Children are to be seen and not heard. So huge, huge for children. The losses they experience many times too will come back up as patterns or trends throughout their adult life, or the losses that they experienced as a child, again, will just be kind of stuffed inside, and they carry those along with them for their lifetime, like they've got a little backpack with all of their losses tucked safely inside, and it just weighs us down.
How would you say techniques or suggestions to help children get through tough times?
Oh, great question, Dawn. And the first thing is adults go first, right? Let's say grandma dies, right? And many times, I know this even from my own story, when my grandmother died, my mom took the call on the phone and didn't have an emotion. And it was a Sunday morning. And she said, I just got the call that your grandma died. Now I'm going to take you to Sunday school. You and your brother go to Sunday school and church, and somebody will come and pick you up when it's over. Excuse me, my grandmother just died, and you want me to go to church like nothing happened, and somebody will come and get me later? And my mom didn't, I mean, I'm sure she had lots of thoughts and feelings going through her mind and her heart, but the way she modeled that for me was, don't feel bad, be strong, just go on with your life, right? So the first tip I would have for parents is, you go first. Tell the truth. If my mother had gotten off that phone and said, this might be hard for you to understand or to hear, but your grandma died this morning. That was my brother who just called, and they want me to come and be there when they come to take grandma out of the house when the funeral director came. My gosh, I'm so surprised. I'm shocked. I'm so sad. I can't believe my mother has died. Your grandma has died. Oh my gosh, sweetie. I can't imagine how that feels like for you, right? And then I would even say, maybe a little later on, maybe not right at that point, but tell the stories. Tell the stories about grandma, right? Because a lot of times when somebody dies, they become the body, the victim, the deceased. We don't even talk about them. Holidays are coming up. As we're doing this recording today, it's the end of October. Holidays are coming up. Well, grandma's chair is going to be empty at the Thanksgiving table, right? So maybe on Thanksgiving Day, let's talk about grandma. Let's tell stories, right? Let's go around the table. What's one of your favorite memories of you and grandma? Oh, I used to love when she did this, or I used to love when we did that. And big people go first, right? When we've done that at our house, or I've heard other people talk about doing that, we laugh until we cry, and we cry until we laugh. But tell the stories, and it brings up those emotions. Everybody knows grandma has died, and so we're all walking on eggshells. So just bring it right out there. Hey, I really miss mom. This is my first Thanksgiving without my mom being here, and I really miss her. I always loved it when she used to bring the pumpkin pies. They were just so special. She made them herself. They weren't those kind out of the grocery store freezer, right? What did you like, Dawn? What did you like about mom? Or what did you like, Benny, about grandma? And ask them, and they'll tell you, if you go first and make it okay to tell a story. All right. So those would be two things. Big people go first, tell the story, tell what you like, share an emotion. If you cry, that's great. If you laugh, that's okay. Our relationships are all up and down. So tell the stories. Tell the truth, tell the stories, tell how it feels.
So that works with death. What about, like you said, divorce, moving
Right. Good
together,
question.
it's normal life?
Exactly. Good question. And so, with the Helping Children with Loss program, there's actually a tool that we use in that program called an emotional energy checklist. And we together, let's say we're the mom and dad, and we might sit down together or not. Maybe we're not speaking to each other, but we would sit down and we would imagine, where might my child have some emotional energy around this? Where might they have some concern, some worry, some anxiety about what's happening? And by thinking ahead of time, I call that a thinking tool. It helps us think before we speak. And so when we kind of just sit and take note of, where might my child have some emotional energy? Maybe it's a little boy who's 12, 13 years old, and he's on the community football team. And daddy's always been the one who took him to football games or football practices, right? And so now that that divorce is happening or happened, mom has taken him to that practice, and out of the back seat of the car, these magical moments happen a lot when you're just the two of you alone in a car at bedtime, and the guy out of the back seat pops up and he says, Mom, I don't think I want to play football anymore. Wow, where did that come from? Right? Where did that come from? Now, if I am a mom who's thought about, where might my child have some emotional energy around this divorce, I will probably have sports activities on my list because I know that he and his dad were real close. And so a pre-grief recovery mom might say, what do you mean you don't want to play football? We've already paid your fees for this year. You've got the equipment. You're going to the game. You're going to practice. That little child is just going to go, I'm not going to talk to mom about that anymore. Right? But if we have thought about it ahead of time and we want to be a better listener and help our child with what's going on, maybe we'll say something instead like, well, gosh, honey, I'm kind of surprised by that. You've always really liked football and you're actually really good at it. So I'm kind of surprised you don't want to play anymore. What's that all about? Well, Dad and I used to throw the football around, and since he hasn't been around, I'm not any good anymore. Oh, wow, sweetie. Well, is there something we could do? I'd be glad to throw the ball with. Oh, no, mom, I don't want you. Right. Well, who else could? So then you can help your child get some choices. Again, we talked before, kids don't think they have a choice or a voice. Well, gosh, honey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we haven't taken that into account. I didn't think about that. Is there something else we could do? Could we get together with your friend's dad and maybe you could, throw the ball around in their yard some, get you back in practice. Or maybe the coach would spend some extra time with you. Or maybe you've got an older sibling or an uncle or somebody who would come and play with you. Right. So we think ahead, where might they have emotional energy? We listen like a heart with ears. We don't come in and just try to fix it or shut it down. We ask some open-ended questions, and then we help them think about what choices they might have. So that's one with a divorce. With moving, maybe the move hasn't happened yet, but the child knows that it's coming. And so maybe even there, I don't know if the child went along to choose the house or did just mom and dad go to look at the houses with the realtor, making sure that the child gets to see the house before the move. Maybe they get a choice as to which room would be their bedroom. Maybe you have pets. Well, where will we keep the pet? Where will the kitty litter box go? Let that child have some say in some of the choices that will be made in that move, even if it's little ones like where to put the kitty litter box. Right, you're not going to ask them maybe which cars do you want to park in the garage or any things that are more adult related, but things that child can have some involvement, some choice, some say in the matter. Again, what room would you like to have? Maybe the walls are a different, what would you like to put on the walls? Let's go take a look at the backyard. Where would you like to have your sandbox be, or where would you like to have your trampoline go? Let's drive around the neighborhood. I'll bet they have a nice park here. Let's drive around and see what kinds of other places there are in the neighborhood. Right? Again, so that you help them get comfortable and familiar with it and have some say in the matter, rather than just dragging them along. The moving van is here on Tuesday. Put your stuff in the box. Right? So giving children, and again, divorce, moving, all kinds of things. But this emotional energy checklist is a great tool for us to think about, where might my child have some concern, some worry, some anxiety, some grief about this move. Making a plan for, we said, well, we'll come back and visit your friends. We'll come back and visit. Let's make a plan. When is that first time we're coming back? Right? Or we'll invite your friends to your new house. Let's make a plan. When is that going to be? Because otherwise, if it doesn't happen, now the child will feel like you've lied to them or misled them. And so if you're going to tell them that we're going to come back and see your old friends, make a plan for how and when that's going to happen. Or your friends can come to visit us. Make a plan for how and when that's going to happen. Be intentional.
Being in hospice, I get asked a lot, what do I tell my kid? What do I
What?
tell the children that are about to lose, but they haven't lost them yet?
Right. Like a grandparent or a parent, or it could even be a sibling. Well, one of the first things we learn when we take our grief recovery method training, do you remember, Dawn, what was up at the top of the slides or the board each day? Tell the truth about yourself all the time. And so that's what I would say here too. And death is everybody's going to die, right? Death is a very common thing. We see it on television all the time. right? And it's always over in a half an hour or an hour whenever the news is over. Death happens. And so being able to, and again, the When Children Grieve book, Helping Children with Loss class, talks about that too, using the right language, right? Even saying, your grandma is, and it depends on the age of the child and their language abilities, but telling the truth, grandma is very sick. Her body is starting not to work the way it used to. Her heart is slowing down, or her breathing and her lungs are slowing down. And so, one of these days, grandma's going to die. Not we're going to lose grandma, or grandma's going to pass away, or grandma's going to go to be with Jesus, right? Grandma's going to die, because those are also very confusing phrases sometimes for children. Passed away. I don't even know what that means or where that came from. Passed away. We're going to lose grandma. Oh my God, we're going to lose them. Where will they be? Will they be in the closet, under the bed? Will I be lost someday? And from my own personal story, when one of our sons was about 6, my mom died, and we are religious people, or were at the time. And we made a big deal about how grandpa had died and gone to heaven to be with Jesus. And so when grandma died, good news, grandma's dead, but she's going to go to heaven and be with grandpa. And one day, my son was misbehaving in the car. And as I tried to kind of scold him and say, stop that, he said to me, he says, Mom, you better be nice to me, or I'm going to kill myself and go to heaven and be with grandma and grandpa. Well, I guess we had talked a little too much about how wonderful it was to go to heaven and be with Jesus,
Oh my
right?
goodness.
Oh my goodness. Exactly. I mean, he was 6 at the time. And so telling the truth, grandma's body is getting old, and it's getting sick, and it's getting weak. You could use examples from nature, like, the leaves are going to fall off the tree, or you see a dead bird on the street or whatever. But use the truth. Grandma's body is getting old, it's wearing out, and things are starting to not work anymore. Her heart's not working, her lungs aren't working, and one of these days grandma's going to die, which means that she will no longer be here with us. She will no longer be here with us in person. She won't be able to talk with us or hold us. But, and again, depending on what your spiritual beliefs are, we will always hold grandma in our heart. You will always be able to talk to grandma in your heart anytime you want to. And sometimes, if you listen really quietly, I believe grandma might talk to you too, right? And just telling the truth, I'm going to miss grandma. I'm going to be really sad. This is the other thing about grief. It can have mixed emotions. I'm going to be really sad when grandma dies, but I'm going to be really thankful that she had such a happy life. She loved you so much. I'm really thankful for the good life that grandma had. Or I'm glad that grandma's not going to be in pain anymore, right? Or maybe they had Alzheimer's and they didn't remember people or things. I, grandma will no longer have to worry about not remembering who you are, or any of those kinds of. So just tell the truth, whatever the truth is, and depending on the child's age and language abilities. I love that Helping Children with Loss class. It's a wonderful program to help adults figure out what to say, how to say, and how to help their children. And again, it could be used with parents or grandparents or family, but it's also a great tool for professionals, school people, teachers, educators, people who are counselors of children, youth, religious leaders, social workers. Imagine foster care or adoption, right? Those are scary things for kids too, right? Imagine if those professionals knew a little bit better about how to talk with kids about change or loss, to make those times less scary for those children.
Well,
So
even as a nurse, like, we're not necessarily taught
absolutely,
what to say.
absolutely right. And that's in the first part of both the grief recovery program and the Helping Children with Loss program, is some things not to say, like don't say don't feel bad, right? That doesn't help me feel better. Telling me not to feel bad just again diminishes or demeans the fact that I feel bad. Or saying, well, a family, in fact, the gentleman who wrote the book, one of the tipping points was he and his wife were expecting a baby, and he knew it was going to be a little boy, and he had the hopes and dreams and expectations he was going to be a better dad to his son than his dad had been to him. But yet and still, when that baby was born and died 3 days later, smart people, doctors, medical professionals said, well, you know, John, you're lucky, you're young, you can have more children. Or, you know, you're lucky, you have a daughter, focus on her. So those things may have been intellectually true, but they were not emotionally helpful. And then religious people said, well, God just needed another little angel, or God won't give you more than you can handle. That may have been spiritually true in some people's way of thinking, but for John, those things weren't emotionally helpful either. So the book actually kind of has a list of the 6 primary, we call them myths, myths and misinformation. Don't feel bad. Replace the loss. Just get another one. Keep busy. It just takes time. Time heals all wounds, right? Or be strong, or grieve alone. And so the book talks about those things that really aren't helpful. And so learning not to say those is a first step. And then what should I say? And again, it comes back to tell the truth, right? We're getting a divorce, and you know it's going to change our whole world. I'm going to have to get a job, and you guys are going to have more chores around the house, you know, and but we're going to do this together. We're going to do this as a team. We'll get through it. Rather than saying, well, you know, you got to be strong for your brothers and sisters now because you're the oldest child. You got to be strong. No, tell the truth. This is happening. It's going to be sad. It's going to be hard. Here are the changes we're going to have to go through, but we'll do it together. And you can always come and talk with me about whatever's going on in your heart, right? Rather than, well, don't feel bad. Daddy was a rat nasty old person. And, you know, just be strong and you can do it. And, you know, we're going to keep busy and still go to school and go to all your activities and 26 more, right? So tell the truth. It's the same thing. It's pretty, that's why that's the overarching message when we do our training is learn to tell the truth.
And that's what I like to tell a lot of my families because they're like, what do I do? And I'm like, you call and you tell people what's going on, then it's their choice on how they want to react.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of times we all walk around on eggshells because we don't want to hurt somebody else, right? But everybody's walking on eggshells. Meanwhile, nobody's telling the truth. And that eats us up. I tell people it's like if you burn something on the bottom of a pot or a pan, right? And you don't get it all off. The next time you cook in there, that little burn spot just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. It's the same thing in our heart. Every time you say, I'm fine, when you're not, or you don't tell the truth about something that's happening, it's like that little burn spot in your heart just kind of gets deeper and deeper and hard to take care of. And so learning right away, even in childhood, to tell the truth. We ask people, would you rather be a storage tank for these feelings, or would you rather be a processing plant? We want them to process it and get it out. Another example I use is a tea kettle, right? With that water, all those things that's happening, it's like the water is boiling down in your little tummy, down in your little heart. And when people say, don't feel bad, just get another one. Oh, and here, eat something, you'll feel better. Or have a drink of this, you'll feel better. It's like putting a cork in the stopper of that tea kettle. And when the fire gets turned up with another loss or some other change that's happened, the pressure gets turned up on those losses that we've been carrying for all these years. And either that cork is going to pop. That's why we have road rage and going postal and bullying, right? Or it's going to eat us up from the inside, and we're going to get ulcers and migraines and high blood pressure and teeth grinding and hair falling out and all kinds of health problems, all the way to a heart attack, or your glucose gets out of shape. And so telling the truth and dealing with those losses. And again, both of these classes teach you the skills of how to do that better. Society and life has taught us just eat something, you'll feel better. Don't feel bad, get another one. Here, smoke this, drink that, drug this, right? Drive risky, whatever. And so we've got to first learn that those ways that society has taught us to grieve really aren't very healthy at all, before we can teach you the new skills and the new tools that will really help you be that processing plant to process the losses in a healthier, happier, more hope-filled way. So,
I can't tell you how many times I've heard families, I got to be strong for so and so.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and my question always is, why? Why
yeah.
do you have to be
Well,
strong?
and the other thing about being strong is it's exhausting, right? It's exhausting because you're pretending. right? You're pretending. Being strong is exhausting. And whoever it is that's being strong, they're a griever too. And so, really, the best thing they can do, again, here comes that message, tell the truth. You know, mommy's kind of worn out today. This has been a really exhausting day. We just had grandma's funeral, and I'm just exhausted. I've been going to the hospital. I've been taking care of her. I'm just exhausted, and I'm sad, and I just need to have some time where I can kind of just be here and cry with you, right? The other thing about being strong for somebody else, it doesn't work because they're also grieving. And so the example I use there is if there's a big 50-gallon bucket out here, and I'm saying, come on, Dawn, baby, pick it up. I'm being strong for you. Come on, pick it up, pick it up. I'm being strong for you. That doesn't help, does it? It doesn't work. I cannot be strong for Dawn. My being strong will not help her carry whatever that load or that grief is. What happens is if I get in there and help her pick up that bucket and we do it together, right? If we do it together. So, a lot of times you'll see slogans and mottos when there's been a tragedy in town. The Boston Marathon was the first one I saw. Boston Strong, right? They were grieving. We had a couple police officers in our community who were killed in the line of duty several years ago. And everybody had their little signs up, my town strong or whatever it is. No, we should be together. We should work on it, grieve together, share the stories. Again, tell the stories. Share your feelings, tell the truth. And that sounds so easy and so simple, this telling the truth business. But I'll tell you what, we have been learned and taught and trained and cultured over our lifetime not to tell the truth. That starts in childhood too. Mom or daddy start telling those little children right from young ages, tell mommy the truth, tell mommy the truth, tell daddy the truth, right? And then when we get our courage up and we tell them the truth, and if they don't like it, they smack us. Or they even do worse and they say, that's not the truth. You're lying to me, right? Why did you ask me to tell you the truth if you knew what the truth was? And so when big people, important people, disbelieve our truth, or worse still, punish us for telling the truth, we learn right at an early age, better not tell people the truth anymore. Just tell them you're fine. Just tell them everything's okay. We have an acronym for FINE in the grief business. Feelings inside not expressed. Right? How many times when you go into a restaurant or a store or a business, the person who greets you says, hi, how are you doing today, Dawn? I'm fine. How are you? Is that the truth? If it's not the truth, it's like another little bit of that burn spot on the bottom of that pot. Your heart knows if you're fine or not. And if you're not fine, it's like telling a lie. And it adds another little layer down here to this untruth. You don't need to tell them all the details. You just need to say what's true for your heart. Well, I'm having a kind of a tough day, but thanks for asking. That's your truth. You don't need to tell them all the details, what's happened or what all the bad things were, right? But just tell them the truth. If fine is not the truth, when you go to a doctor's office and the receptionist comes out, or the little chippy in the blue suit comes out and calls you in for your appointment with the doctor. Hi, Mrs. Hall, how are you? I will not say I'm fine if I'm not fine. I'll say, you know what? My dad and mom both died of cancer. I'm here today for a cancer screening test. I'm a little bit nervous about that. I've heard it's not a real pleasant test, and I sure don't want to, I'm nervous about getting those results. I don't want to be told I have cancer. That's my truth. And she doesn't know how to respond because most people say, oh, I'm fine. How are you? Right? So that's another tip too. If you are a person who's in a position to ask people, how are you doing? Stop asking that question. It begs them to lie. You could ask me anything else when I go to that doctor's appointment. Did you have any trouble finding parking today? What's the weather like? What do you have planned for after your appointment this afternoon? Just don't ask me how am I or how am I doing, because I have already been taught, trained, and cultured to respond, I'm fine, even if I'm not. So again, if you're a person who's in the position to ask that question, think of some other question. Otherwise, they'll probably start by telling you a lie. Seems so simple and so innocuous, but they all add up. And it wears our heart down. It burdens us. It just makes our heart sad that once again, our heart was not heard. Goes back to not having a voice.
Yep.
So
I would like to ask if there's any questions from anyone. Just unmute and ask away.
Or put it in the chat.
Mhm.
While they're working up their courage, I hope. I would also I would be remiss if I didn't mention there is a lot of information on the website. And so I would suggest that you go to griefrecoverymethod.com. I'll repeat that, griefrecoverymethod.com. And we have blogs on a variety of topics. You can put a search term in there and search for a blog on a particular topic. Maybe it's addiction, maybe it's suicide, maybe it's chronic diseases, maybe it's divorce, maybe it's moving. And you'll probably come up with a list of at least a couple blogs that our staff have written. There is also a wonderful directory of grief recovery method specialists. And so if somebody has been through our training and they have at least done a pilot program so that we know they know what they're doing, they will be listed in that directory. And there are several places on the website where you can put in your city, your town, your zip code, and you can search for somebody to do this program with you, either in person or online. So a ton of resources on griefrecoverymethod.com. And probably Dawn will give you information on how to get in touch with her after this webinar as well. And so she is also a resource for you. So.
Well, thank you so much for all the great advice. Because that helps me. I mean, it helps me with my full-time job as a hospice nurse.
Absolutely.
Because I walk with
Absolutely.
so many different aspects of everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, I think everybody, again, my job was in public health. I was an epidemiologist, the numbers person. 100% of us are grievers. I think every single person would benefit by going through the grief recovery method. Again, either as an 8-week group or a 7-session one-on-one. And to just kind of unpack all those old losses, all the way from childhood, that have been weighing us down. So if any of your listeners or those who see this webinar later, please, 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 griefrecoverymethod.com, find one of those places, put your city, town, or zip code in there. Find the book, get the book. You can order the book off of the website too. Maybe you don't want to go to a class. Maybe you want to just read the book first and see what you think. Fine, do that. But do something to help move you to a place of a happier, healthier, more hope-filled life. For you, for your family, for your children, your coworkers, your friends, your neighbors, your students, anybody, all of us can benefit from this information.
Yeah. Well, since we don't have any questions or nobody's putting anything out there, I thank you so much for your time.
Very welcome.
You'll have a little bit of time before your next meeting. And I would love to do this again and maybe hit something other than the children.
Sounds good.
That's where we went, so that's where I ran with it.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, and we could, I mean, think about the losses of growing older, of aging, right? Health challenges, giving up the car keys, moving from your home to a senior living facility. And there are a lot of losses associated with aging too. So, yep, broad topic.
Yeah, even just everyday life.
Everyday life. Disappointments, hopes and dreams and expectations. Everyday life. Absolutely. So thank you, Dawn. Thank you for having me today. And to those who watched live or those who will watch the recording, thank you very much. Please, please, please get in touch with Dawn. Go to griefrecoverymethod.com. Learn more. So
thank you so much.
You bet. How can they reach you, Dawn?
I actually am working on a website. It's overabundanceoflight.com. And then I'm on Facebook and email Dawn Fackler at npconsulting1.com.
Very good. So. Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and leave the webinar, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
You bet. Bye.
Bye.